Pilates understand like what they really need to do to be careful in their bodies and be very specific about how they're moving through some of the exercises. So we're going to be starting today with just looking at laying down on the back and then starting to move our spines, because Joe Pilates really believed that you needed to be able to move your spine in a way that was safe for it, but that made it more flexible and also strengthened the muscles around it. So it's important where you start, and we're going to be starting laying on your back. So you may need for this class, you might need a towel, possibly a small ball, possibly a TheraBand. If you have those things, that's great. If you don't worry about it. So as you settle down onto your mat, you'll lay on back. And the first thing to see is, number one, is if your chest is tight, you might feel that your head is falling backwards when you lay down. So if your chin is higher than your forehead, what you want to do is think, number one, of like curling your shoulders up a little bit to broaden your back, and then release your shoulders down and see if that made a change. And if not, you can always grab a towel. It could be, your folded sweatshirt or t-shirt, and take it under your head so that way when you're laying down, your forehead and your chin are level. And then the next thing we want to think about is the pelvis level and is your back in its natural curves, because our spine has multiple curves. And we want to think about having a slight arch at the waist, heaviness through the ribs and the back of the shoulder blades, and heaviness at the sacrum and the tailbone. So when you're laying on your back, once you get the head adjusted so that the neck is in a comfortable position and you're not tilted back, stretching the throat too much, you then want to adjust the hips. So if you take your hands to your hip bones, you should feel that your hip bone crest, which are the little pointy bits up here, and the pubic bones are in the same plane. And then that would be what we would consider a neutral spine. You'd be flat across the pelvis, almost as if the bony structure was like a table that you could place a coffee cup on without spilling the liquid in any direction at all. And then from there, we begin with spinal movement, starting with the tail. So if you think of pushing your waist down, your tail will lift and the hip bones will drop. So if your hands are again still with the heel of the hand on the hip bone crest and the fingertips on the pubic bone, when you're in what we call a pelvic tuck, you would have the fingertips higher than the hip bone crest. When you go to a neutral, the fingertips are on the same level as the hip bone crest. And if you go into an arch, the heel of the hand would be higher than the fingertips. So you can take the pelvic girdle in all kinds of different angles. So you can rock it as you press your waist down. The tail will lift, and the angle of the pelvis is on a tilt going up on a diagonal. When the pelvis is level, the hip bone crest and the tail would be in the same plane. And in the arch back, the belly would be lifted. You'll feel the stretch in the abdominal wall, and the tailbone, the pubic bones are lower. The bone crest is the highest bit there. So would start by rocking the pelvis a little bit. In Pilates, we typically exhale into a flex spine. Flex just means it's bending backwards. So a pelvic tuck would be a small flexion of your spine. And then you would maybe inhale to take it back to neutral, and then exhale, breathing out to curl the tail up, flatten the waist into the ground. The pelvis is on a slight diagonal off the floor, but you're not up. So it's different from just, take my hands back, it's different from lifting the whole body up off the ground. This is just a slight tilt on the exhale and then back to neutral. And this starts to warm up your low back and warm up your spine. Now I'm looking at the screen to see you all, but you wouldn't want to think about elevating and pushing down through the feet to come up. That's a different exercise, which we'll do in a bit. However, you might want to think about this rocking of the pelvis that we're doing, moving from a tuck to a neutral to the arch, moving your spine all the way through. You'll feel that when you tuck, the back widens and presses into your mat. When you arch, the chest broadens and the back narrows and lifts away from the floor. So just a couple of these, exhaling into the tuck, inhale as you move through neutral into the arch, and exhale back into the tuck again. And notice how you feel this all the way up. Even your head and your chin might move. So when you tuck, the chin might want to tilt down a little bit towards the tail. When you arch, the chin might want to lift back slightly. And you don't have to exaggerate it. You just want to let the flow of the movement go from the bottom of the spine to the top. Now from there, we're going to take it into an exercise called bridge. So there's different ways to do bridge. Often in physical therapy, what they'll do is they'll just have you have your knees bent, your feet directly in line with the sits bones, about 4 to 5 inches apart. We do the same in Pilates. But then in the physical therapy version, it's more just a hip hike. So you could press down into your arms and just lift the body like a plank straight up. So you're getting the support from your glute and you're an open line here. The hips lift without really rolling through the back. So it's just a crease at the hip to lower down and then also to push up. So that would be a hip hinge. You see, so I'm just working from the spine stays in neutral and we pick it up. There's a little bend at the shoulder blades and then down again. Now a bridge in Pilates is a little different because we're working spinal articulation, which means that we're thinking of moving one vertebra at a time, as if the spine was a chain and I'm lifting one link after the next. So I could begin by pressing lightly through my feet just to feel some support there. But we start with a pelvic tuck. The waist goes down, the tail tilts up. So again, if my hands were on the pelvis, I would be thinking the fingers were up, the heel of the hand would be down. But then we're going to start to curl the tail forward, move the knees forward, and lift the body up a little bit at a time until you go up to that position we were just in. So it's much more gradual than the first thing I showed you where you just like popped up and then down again. Now here on the way down, you can widen your shoulder blades behind you and you roll. You think of imprinting down from your sternum, breastbone down, trying to keep the hips elevated as you press the rib cage down below the ribs to the waist, below the waist to the sacrum, across the sacrum to the tail. So it's very snaky. It's like you want to feel that your whole body is a wave or a snake and that it's getting picked up at one end and then gradually being pulled forward, out, and up. So you ripple through your spine to lift, and then you ripple through your spine starting at the top to come on down. And then all the way down when the tail releases into the ground, the waist, there's a little space there where you'd probably slide your fingers under your waistline at that point. And then just one more. Sometimes people get hamstring cramps when they do that. And if that's the case, a ball between the thighs would help release it because then you're engaging your inner thigh muscles. So let's do a couple of these. So we start inhaling to start a pelvic tuck. I'm taking my arms to the side so maybe you could see my spinal movement better. Your hands would be pressing down at the side of your body here. So we begin with that pelvic tuck and we push the knees forward out over the toes. But I'm really thinking that the tail is moving the spine up and forward. At the end, the waist is up, the glutes are active to hold the hips up in the air. And then we come down, not from the butt first, because then the back would arch, but think of pressing down through the upper back, roll through the ribs, from the top to the bottom, roll into the waist. The tail is in that pelvic tuck now. And then you go all the way down across the sacrum and down onto the tail. So that is a nice way to start to release back tension and start to work different levels of the abdominals. As you do that pelvic tuck, any kind of flexion, the abs are contracting across the vertical front line, and then they release and they stretch when you move into a neutral or into an arch back extended position. These are just sort of the basic vocabularies, the ABCs of some of the Pilates movements that we're starting with today. Now that in that exercise in bridge, we started moving from the tail to the upper back, and then on the way down, we went from the upper back to the tail. The next thing we want to look at in spinal movement is what's called an upper ab curl, in which you bring the head up. First, you float the head, then you bring your chin to your chest. You lift the head and the neck coming up as high as you can, like so, to look down. And then we're going to bring the neck down and back first, feel the base of the skull touch, and then look up at the ceiling. So just that part is the head tilts, and then you pick it up. Now, if you're not used to doing this, you may want to take your hands behind the head to pull this up. We're not quite in an upper ab curl yet, but we're headed there. but we want to see that the movement includes lifting the head and the neck and then releasing back, neck, head still tilted, and then you lay it back and you look up at the ceiling. Now that can be tough for people's necks. I lost my towel. So a good way to practice this is to have a towel that you're laying down onto. You'll take it under your hips, under your shoulders, and then also hold on to it, your hands at the corners of the towel. You can pick the elbows up and then start by just pulling forward, the shoulders still down, to lift the head to a more vertical position. And then you can lay down your neck, lay down your head, look up at the ceiling. So that's a great version for people who are like worried about their necks or just haven't built any strength into it yet. And it's the beginning of spinal mobility because the neck is part of our spine. It's just the cervical part of it. So from there, and you may, for this one, want to take your hands behind your head, either that or use the towel. We're coming up a little higher. So this is what is called an upper ab curl. It's a major part of a lot of different exercises. So many of the Pilates exercises begin with moving the spine from one end to the other and back again. So in here, you tip your head forward, you pull the head up, and then you lift so that you're coming up, so that you're resting on the tip of your shoulder blades, a little lower into the back. You'll feel that engage into the abdominals, particularly the upper abdominals under the chest. And then to release out, you're lengthening the abdominal wall to go back and down easy. You roll through the ribs, you roll through the spine, you lower the head, you lower your elbows wide and out if you're holding your head with your hands. Let's do that again. So you think floating the head up, chin to chest, lift the neck, and then you start to pull the shoulders up. If you have your hands here, it's helpful to pull the elbows in and forward and down to come up. And you feel like you're pressing your waist down. The tail also rises a little bit. Coming back out of that upper ab curl, you can lay it down again and let the head sink back. And that will progress, having the arms at the side as you come up, and the arms can reach forward. Sometimes even holding weights will pull you up. It's easiest for the neck if the neck is more vertical as opposed to hanging back. If your head is hanging back like this, that's not really an upper ab curl. You're going to feel a lot of tension in the neck, which we never want. So while you're learning and building the strength and the flexibility into your body to do this, we recommend that you use the towel to help you come up higher and deeper and really feel the upper abs engage. And then you can bring it down. The progression there is then to the hands to the head, lifting and pulling it up. Now, if you are having trouble getting into that because your body is either not flexible enough or not strong enough in that particular area right under the chest, you can always use a small ball for exercises that are static when you're in the upper ab curl and take it behind the shoulder blades, and that will help you tip up definitely higher like so. So an exercise, we'll do this one now, of hundreds, you could pull your knees into your chest, tabletop legs, and then in that upper ab curl, you would stretch the arms forward and pump the arms up and down. So this is an easy way to do this exercise because you're already supported into a deep curve. However, if you wanted to progress, then you would be in that same position and you'd be pumping the arms here. Hundreds is designed as an exercise to wake up the body, give you a little cardio. You're inhaling for 5 beats, exhaling for 4. As you inhale, the breath expands the body. And as you exhale, you pull the belly deep. Now, if you're in this tabletop position, this is pretty easy, but if it's still too hard, like if it feels like it's too much for the low back, you could lower your heels down to your butt or even take your feet to the ground. However, if it feels like it's not enough, the legs to tabletop is more weight. The legs extended up in the air is more weight. And taking the legs forward and out is more weight. So you want to go where you get the maximum work, where you want to feel it in your abs, but not into your neck and not into your back. So we would continue. Hundreds was called that because ideally you're doing 10 breaths, inhale for 5 beats, exhale for 5 more, 10 breaths would then make 100 pumps. We're going to leave it at that. Fold your knees, and then you can lower your head back down. All right. Now, another way to get into the upper ab curl is to start from a seated position and do what we call a rollback. So in rollback, again, you're working your spine 1 vertebra at a time to go down and then up. So we start with that pelvic tuck that you just did laying on your ground. So come up to sitting, your hands to the back of your thighs, and you'll let your hands slide down the legs towards your tailbone as you work. Begin here with the vertical spine, head floating up to the ceiling. You're perched on your sits bones. And then you can start with a pelvic tuck. So you curve the tail forward. If you were a tiger, your tiger tail would go out between your heels and then up the wall in front of you. And then you hammock your body down. I'm going to bring my arms forward so you can see what my spine is doing. And you're going to slowly bring your body down 1 inch, one vertebra at a time. Hands to your legs would be more supportive. You can bring them along as you lower. And we could go down right into the upper rib curl where you're just on the ribs, but maybe below the tips of the shoulder blades. And then let's come up. So you use your hands to your legs, you pull your head up, you keep that spine curved. I'm still in a scoop shape with my back as I lift up a little bit at a time. And then it's a great idea to go forward and stretch out the back, dive the head down between the knees. You can separate there and then come all the way upright, stack your spine from the bottom to the top. If you have a TheraBand, this also gives it a good assist. You know, particularly when you're taking classes either with a lot of people or on Zoom like we are right now, it's good to know that you have different ways to modify the exercises. And in my regular classes, in all my classes, I give modifications for people at different levels. So here again, you would take the band around the ball of the foot and the arch, hold onto the band. I'll pull my elbows up so that you could see what my spine is doing, but you would most likely have yours down and in by your side. And then you look down, you curl the tail up in that pelvic tuck. So you're rotating, you're rocking the pelvis back from underneath the thigh bone, the femur, and then you roll your spine down a little bit at a time. My hands are high again so you can see the spine, but you would bring it down inch by inch, one vertebra after the next, until you flatten out your spine by laying onto your shoulders, laying the head back all the way to the ground. And then we come up. You float the head just a fraction off the ground to engage the neck. You bring your chin to your chest. You curve the neck forward and up. At this point, you may want to pull the elbows wide and back as you lift. We're still trying to get that rounding of the spine so that you're working every inch of your abdominal wall. And then you're working deep into your psoas muscle, also your hip flexor, to pull your body off the ground and then dive it forward and down. Now, when you first start this, you may feel that it's more like you're bringing up chunks of your spine at one time because you're not used to moving it like this. But it's important that we get flexibility in the spine so it's healthy all the way through, all the discs, all the vertebra. And while we're learning it, give it enough support so you don't overwork it and don't feel like it puts you in a place where your body isn't comfortable. So the TheraBand is always an option here. This is called a roll back when we start sitting up and we curl back and we're rolling our spine down. Now, if you imagine that you're wearing a striped shirt, I should have thought to wear one, but you could think of the stripes being about an inch wide and you're taking one stripe down, then you're pressing the next stripe down into the mat, then the next stripe releases you down a little bit more, then the next stripe takes you down slightly further, and then the next stripe again, so that you're working very specifically the front of your body to release you back all the way down. And then of course, the front of the body is going to have to pick you up too. So we lift the head, the neck, the shoulders, take your hands to the back of your legs, start to pull your shoulders forward. That way it pulls the blades apart on your back, come up slowly as you can. Use the band if you want to, use your hands to your legs or use none of that at all. And then you're coming up and gradually rolling forward, your spine in a scoop shape, diving over here, and then lift to come all the way up. So these will be great things that you can practice on your own. And when you're in Pilates classes, this kind of movement is seen over and over and over again. So the next thing we want to look at is going into just knee sways. So we'll give you a chance to open your chest and also feel your spine move or not move depending on how you're doing the exercise. So we roll back again. So you can start just the hands forward, it's more difficult, and roll your body down, or of course, TheraBand or hands to your legs, depend what your body needs, where you are. You go down slowly. As you go down, you release the tail, so the belly is flat as you go to the ground. Now, we want to be on our feet, the legs still about 4 inches apart so that the knees are in line with the hip joints, and then open the arms out to the side. The first one is just a nice stretch for the body. We're going to let both knees fall over to your right, and that tips the hip up, and you're looking over your left arm. So eventually the goal would be to keep your chest parallel to the ceiling, the hips more parallel to the wall. How far can you go without taking the scapula, the shoulder blade, off the ground here on your left side? And then you'll exhale and roll the body back across. You're picking up the knees and you're going across your sacrum. And then we'll continue to the other side. So as the knees fall to your left, you'll turn your head and look to your right. I'm not going to do that because I'm looking to see what you're doing. And then you can pull it back on the exhalation. So that maybe you feel the oblique abdominals, which are diagonal muscles in your abdominal wall, pull you back to center. So let's do that again. So let the knees fall over to the right, turn your head to the left. Mine's already there because I'm looking at the screen. And go as far as you can. Now you may have done this in yoga classes, and often they'll have you take your right hand onto your top left leg to pull it down, or maybe even take your hand to the hip and think of pushing it away from the armpit to get a bigger stretch there. And then you can exhale, and we're rolling diagonally across the body to pull the knees up and settle the pelvis level on the mat. And then let's inhale to continue taking the knees over to the left. Turn your head, look away. And the right shoulder would be grounded. And you'll feel that stretch diagonally across the chest. This is great for opening up your pecs, opening your chest after being too many hours on the computer today already. And then exhale and pull it on back slowly, working here to come back, really working through your core. Now there's another way you can do that exercise to feel your abdominals, not as much of a stretch, but definitely a work. So in that, you're laying on your back, your hands on your hip bones. And then as you take the legs over to the right, see how far you can go without lifting that left hip. So maybe take both hands into the left hip bone and press it down. And if you release your hands there, you're going to feel that your left side is trying to rotate and push down into the mat underneath you against the weight of the legs. You can't go very far because as soon as you take the legs too far, you're going to feel that you're going to lose the connection of your left glute into the mat. Like that is a nice stretch, but I'm not doing that much to strengthen my abdominal wall. So if I want to feel that the work is happening in my abs in this exercise, I keep the hips grounded and I only take the legs over as much as I can. I'm going to feel the whole diagonal line of my abdominal wall is reaching this way down into that left hip to keep it grounded against the weight and movement of the leg. And then pull it on back. I hope you can all feel that. And then let's try it to the other side. So now we're going to let both knees sway over to the left, and you're going to take your hands to the right hip bone, hold it there. It's a very small movement of the legs, right? So it's not a big stretch, but it is, or it should be, work diagonally into your abdominals like a big X that crisscross from your rib cage to the opposite hip. You're going to feel that work as you try to press your right side into the floor against the weight of the leg. So this is an important concept for us in Pilates. We want to think that to stabilize the body, I'm not going to keep it rigid and locked down. Like it's not the best idea to just think, okay, I'm glued to the mat and I'm taking the legs over. But that works. You know, it's just not the best thought, the best option. It's going to be better for you to think about, I'm sinking into the right side, like I'm falling into quicksand as the knees go over to the left, because then you've got opposition, you've got pull and work in the body in two different directions simultaneously. And you're going to feel more going on if you think that way. And then let's pull it on back. And then we'll go to the other side. So I can think, okay, I'm glued to the mat, gorilla glue under my back, under my butt. And then let me see if the gorilla glue will hold as I sway the knees over to the right. And it does to a certain extent, but I'll even get a little bit more work and maybe a little bit more mobility if I'm thinking that I'm dropping down, like I'm falling, like there's a magnet underneath me and it's pulling me and sinking me into the mat on the left side as the knees go to the right. And then you can pull the legs back to center from there. All right, so from that, we're going to come up and do an exercise called spine stretch. So for every class, we'll be doing more exercises and less of this sort of introductory, these are the foundations, these are the fundamentals of Pilates. Here we're starting sitting up. If your back of your legs, your hamstrings are tight, you would want to bend your knees or elevate yourself to sit up on like a yoga block or a book. And here, the legs apart, a little wider than your hips. Extend the arms forward, stretch them out, and try to sit perched up right on your sits bones. Then you'll look down, and you're going to be leaning from the top of your head. So it's as if there's hands here pulling you out, over, and down. Your body's diving in a way forward, looking down and in at the mat, and then under and in towards your own belly. The arms will be floating forward to touch wherever they touch on your legs. And then to stack up. If you picture there's a wall behind your back, you're going to lift up into the wall from your low spine, up to the middle spine, up to the upper spine, and finally the neck and the head lift and you look across the room at the horizon. So we do that again. So you inhale to go up, feel the body float up as if your head was filled with helium. You would look down, tipping your chin to your chest, lowering your gaze, and then feel the head pull the neck forward in a curve, in an arc. And then that's going to move you through the upper back, the thoracic spine, to the middle of the back. Even pull your waist back like someone's trying to hold you back, preventing you from going forward. And you're going to dive your head out, over, and down. The ears between the arms, going down, take the stretch. If you feel restricted, bend your knees and go further. You want to feel like this is good for your body, like it's a great stretch. And then on the way up, as you start to lift from your back, the belly is going to lengthen on up. And you come up a little bit at a time from the low part of your spine to the upper part of the spine. Finally, the head floats free and it floats up as you look across. You've lifted the horizon as you've gotten taller with every repetition. And let's do that again. So inhale up, shoulders easy, collarbones wide. We'll relax your shoulders down your back. And then you tip your gaze down, chin to chest, move forward with the head and the neck first. This movement does not start at the waist or the hip. It starts at the very top of the body. So you move through the spine from the top on down. Pull the waist back as you round forward, up and over. It's as if you're coming over a large beach ball, and you're going to roll your spine forward over the ball, diving down and forward into the sand between your legs. Bend your knees as necessary. Still feel the stretch in a good way in the back of your legs. Then you can press down through your legs, down through your feet. Imagine your tailbone going deep into the center of the earth, and then you're going to pull your body up on top of that tail on top of the sacrum. The spine ripples up, it sits up, you sit tall. You can literally do this against a wall, and it's really helpful. We'll do one more. Inhale, lifting up here, and then you look down, and we exhale to dive forward, coming out, over, and around that invisible ball. Try to curve your back. You bend your spine, and of course there's hip flexion as you go to the end of it, but that's not the beginning of the movement, because we're thinking more about spinal flexion, bending the spine and curving it, than we are about just hinging and going forward like so. That's a whole different thing, which is still a good thing, but just not this. And once more, so once you're all the way down, because you guys are already down, and then you're going to come up. It's nice to imagine a small ball, like at the belly, below the navel, rolling up the front of your body a little bit at a time. It gives you a slightly different feeling than imagining being picked up from the back of your body, even though the back muscles really are pulling you up. The belly muscles are also releasing to take you up here. All right, so good. So hopefully this was helpful and it gave you some things to think about for your next Pilates class, which if you're new to this, maybe will be next Wednesday again here on Zoom with me. So thanks so much for showing up for class today. And if you have any questions, you can stay on and ask them. I'll hang out for a little bit. So if I can help anyone with